Is there scope for any like newness? It seems like you may just want the new Led Zeppelin, or you may want something so from the previous rock and roll blueprint. Is there?
No, I don't want something from the previous rock and roll. Okay, let me explain that. Does Guns N' Roses look or sound like Van Halen? Does Van Halen look or sound like Leonard Skinner? Does Leonard Skinner look or sound like AC/DC? Does AC/DC look or sound like Kiss? Does Kiss look or sound like Led Zeppelin? Does Led Zeppelin look or sound like the Rolling Stones? None of these bands look or sound like each other, but they feel like they're from the same lineage. And they feel like they take you to the same world of madness and glamour and bohemianism and excitement and thrill and party and consoling and all of that stuff. I just want that lineage to continue, because as much as I acknowledge that Muse and Radiohead and Queens of the Stone Age have are substantial, I don't think that they're from the same lineage, and I don't think that they take you to that same world. And yeah, that's what I want to do. Like, I don't want a band to be a throwback to Van Halen. I don't want a band that dresses up like Motley Crue or Guns N' Roses or sounds like them. I don't want that to happen. I don't want them to be a clone of that. Because that's what's happening right now. What's happening is that they're a clone of that. When you go up the Sunset Strip, that's what's happening. What's happening is that they're settling for an aesthetic similarity. They're not writing to make the listener lose control and wobble his head and make his knees feel weak. They're not writing to make a listener lose control and shake his hips. They're not writing to make a listener like testify and joyous, and raise his hands. They're not making the listener, have a tense grin and bang his head. They're not aiming to write that. What they're doing is they're just aiming to write an aesthetic similarity. Oh, it sounds really Gunsy. It has that Guns vibe. And then they don't realize they sound like a 7th-rate version or a 4th-rate version of a B-side of Guns N' Roses. They're completely oblivious that this is happening. Thin Lizzy and Rory Gallagher were one of the only two bands that mixed Irish folk with blues and rock and roll. And that's why they're the only ones that sound like that. So you can't listen to anyone else to get that, because they have their own twist. Therefore, they're fresh. I think that bands today aren't aiming to be fresh. I think they're aiming to be a revival of something that existed before, or they're just being really abstract. But more of the bands that I'm building the roster of, I think that the problem is that they're just reviving something that's done before, and they're not conscious about doing their own twist. Like Nicky Sixx, when he did Motley Crue and the Shout at the Devil album, he got the inspiration for the clothes from Mad Max. That's how he wanted to be theatrical. And Kiss got it from comic books. But the new bands, they're dressing up like Motley Crue, circa 1985 or 85, I don't know, for Shout at the Devil. They're not... If you want to be theatrical, that's fine. If you want to be glamorous, that's fine. If you want to be larger than life, that's fine. But why do what they did? Why be a clone of them? Be fresh. You can get that visual cue from The Fifth Element or something, and start your own thing.
But that's not fresh if you take it from The Fifth Element, is it?
Or if it's inspired by it. Like, the thing is that realize that the theatricality, the glamour is what's important, not the formula of a previously done thing. Because if you do that, people are going to compare you with the previously done thing. And they're just going to say that the originator deserves more credit and deserves more praise. So you got to have your own twist. And I don't think bands are making their own twist right now. I think in order for rock and roll to be a dominant, undeniable force right now, we have to have substance that matches up or surpasses Radiohead and Queens of the Stone Age and Muse. We have to be a wilder party spirit than Lil Wayne and Kesha. We have to be more larger than life than Lady Gaga. We have to have a more library of party songs than the hip-hop genre of today has, or the trance and techno and house and pop and the top 40 genres of today have. We have to we have to be like more badass than Ice-T or whoever the role model for that. We have to have more sex appeal than if we surpass all those guys, if we surpass all those guys and all those elements, then we'll be an undeniable force. Nobody's going to deny us.
Yeah, but that doesn't really seem possible, man.
It is. It is possible if you're conscious about that's what needs to be done, then it is possible. I mean, it doesn't have to be encapsulated in one band, but the genre itself has to offer all that and create that world that everybody can get sucked into. And find all those needs. They can seek all those needs to get fulfilled in that world. And then we're going to be an undeniable force. Right now, the rock and roll world is either too bland or too gloomy. Like it's either that Beetlejuice extras or a Tim Burton vibe going. And that's it. You have sex appeal like Jim Morrison. You have glamour like David Bowie circa, the Ziggy Stardust phase. You have larger than life like Kiss. You have party animal like David Lee Roth from Van Halen. You have badass like Lemmy from Motorhead. You have that romantic bohemian lifestyle from Rolling Stones. Did one of those bands have all of that? No. But you got sucked into that world and you had all those people. And you had that world of madness. It's like what Jack Kerouac says. He's like, the only people for me are the mad ones. The ones who are, I don't know verbatim the quote, the ones who are mad to say a commonplace thing, the ones who are mad to live, mad to breathe, mad to... You don't have that madness anymore.
Like Catherine Reels in this guy.
And live fabulous through yellow Roman candles and say that you don't have that madness anymore. That madness was represented by personalities like Ozzy Osbourne, like David Lee Roth, like Iggy Pop, like all those guys gave you all that madness, which gave that world a lot of excitement. And right now, these new bands are not doing that.
Well, in England we have that, in like people like Pete Doherty and Amy Winehouse and stuff like that.
Yes, it's in other genres. And that's why those other genres are the dominant forces and not rock and roll. I know it's coming from a noble place. No, what matters is the music, like the indie guys. What matters is the music and nothing else does. And that is a very noble mentality and argument. But realize that...
No, I mean, with Winehouse and Doherty, what meant a lot to Winehouse was the place. She's from Camden. She's from that place in London. She has a beehive hat, which was like has polka dots and everything. And she had a place that she could be proud of, and her local pub, and a thing in an area that was real. Whereas here, it's just like a little manufacturing line. Like they're just, everyone's just waiting for the next thing and then pouncing, dissecting before it's even done.
No, the thing is that when I see Hammered Satin, I see that potential to campaign glamour. When I see Kevin Preston from Prima Donna, I see that potential to campaign sex appeal. When I see the people from Nothing Sacred, I see that potential to campaign that badass element, like Lemmy from Motorhead. But like that street uprising, like Guns N' Roses, like that's in Nothing Sacred as well. Like those elements will all be campaign successful. Like when people saw Prince, he was androgynous, and like a lot of men felt uncomfortable with that androgyny. But because he was good, he was undeniable. He says, yeah, I like Prince and I don't care, fuck you. They had to say that in order to justify that they like Prince. Why? Because he had substance. You have column A and column B. Column A are bands like AC/DC, Rage Against the Machine, Nirvana. Column B is the Rolling Stones and Jimi Hendrix. What's the difference between the two? The difference is that column A, they're niche-y, they're specializing. AC/DC specializes in party music. Rage Against the Machine specializes in social, political, conscious music. And Nirvana specializes in like consoling, anger, therapy, or whatever. It specializes in that. And whereas in column B, the Rolling Stones do all three of it. And Jimi Hendrix does all three of it. They do the party stuff, they do the profound stuff, they do the social political conscious stuff, and they do the sad consoling stuff. They're a universal act, right? And I think that in a musical climate like the 70s, there was an abundance of all of it. So everybody was satisfied. Instead of, okay, the market says you only need one of these things, and that's what we're going to feed you, and nothing else. So for instance, death metal is something that the majority of listeners are like male audiences. And like, you know, pop like Britney Spears or the Spice Girls or Beyonce is something that the majority of listeners are like mostly women. And like Justin Bieber and like High School Musical is mostly kids or tween market or whatever, right? They'd alienate the rest of the demographics, or and they'd only appeal to certain ones. So when you play this in a large party, one of them will get frustrated, and the rest and certain people will be happy. Whereas if you have a universal product, like Michael Jackson and Stevie Wonder started out as kids, but they appealed to everybody. And Tina Turner and Aretha Franklin and Janis Joplin appealed to everybody. And and Jimi Hendrix appealed to everybody. Like, those were artists that were universally appealing.
You know what's interesting is that when you talk like a studio head or someone. There's almost nobody on the grass level who wants to be an artist or affiliates themselves with the life of helping artists and being part of it that wants universal product. And when you're looking for universal product, it's been the death of modern cinema. It's killing modern music.
Well, do you think?
And yet you're looking for like the universality of rock.
No, because I don't think that's an analogy in any way related to what I just said. Because when I talk about sad, when I talk about sad and consoling music and party music and profound music, I'm not talking about one song. I'm talking about a whole repertoire.
But
So when
isn't the rock and roll you describe in such sense already such a niche that it will never be as universal as you're trying to?
I think it can. I think that bands can pop up and have a repertoire of all of it. I am for the depth. I love the Doors because they're so profound and philosophical. I love Jimi Hendrix because he's so soulful and consoling. I love all those guys. And I think that our library of contemporary music right now is doing a great job at offering an abundance of that. And that's great. I don't want to annihilate it. I don't want to get rid of it. I'm not backlashing against that. I'm just backlashing against the absence of other things too. Because they're too focused on just that.
Music.
Not only party music. Like, okay, so the party element is one thing. What's the other stuff? The larger than life element. What do I mean by that? Kiss. All right, when you look at Wayne's World, and when you see Wayne and Garth go to Alice Cooper and backstage, and he goes, "We are not worthy. We are not worthy." To just be enamored by a rock star instead of a normal person with an instrument. That's what's larger than life. Something that's bigger than you are, something that's more profound than you are. That is being done only by Gaga and not done by the rock and roll bands.
But then because it's.
But then it's a problem in the attitude of the rock and roll bands.
Exactly. The problem is the attitude of the rock and roll bands. They're too humble.
Was it not a parody that he was keeping the adulation of a 17-year-old and supplanting it into an older man's body, and from that is the basis of comedy, such as a lot of Will Ferrell things? There's actually never been a time in history where you've ever actually been, "I'm not worthy," once you've reached the cynical, analytical age you are now.
Well, of course it's a satire and exaggeration of it. But still, when you go to a Kiss concert...
Yeah, you don't have a rock and roll star at the moment.
No.
But for example, like...
I think...
Why is that?
No, I think you'll feel a little starstruck when you see I don't know, like Matthew McConaughey, and you're like, oh my God, that's Matthew
No,
McConaughey.
I've seen
He's
David
he's a
Bowie,
celebrity. What, but what I'm talking about, you go to a concert and then the lights flash, and then a majestic presence enters the stage, and he gives you that Olympic feeling that like you see a world of fantasy, like, and a world that's larger than life, like, unravel in front of you, and you're so, like, you have stars in your eyes, and
Like
you're
Freddie Mercury.
like Freddie
Have you
Mercury.
seen a Coldplay concert these days?
Yeah,
Col-
Muse are pretty
Or
good at
Muse,
that.
but that's
Muse, they come
fucking
across.
larger than life.
Muse come across like the singer of Muse. He performs very well and whatever, but their bass player is too humble. Like, he just, and
He's too cool to be there. That's the thing.
I mean they have a sound that's big, and they have a sound that's exhilarating. They're doing a great job to be larger than life on a sonic level, but in terms of putting on a show, they're not doing it as well as Van Halen. I think that, okay, look at it this way. What's Deep Purple's twist? They have the Renaissance, they have the jazz, they have the Mediterranean, and that not others are doing. That's why they sound like they're Deep Purple, and nobody else sounds like that. Just them. Oriental and classical and Renaissance and medieval and like he was. Put it this way. Guns N' Roses looked up to Nazareth and Electric Light Orchestra and Rose Tattoo. That was other bands. And Van Halen looked up like to Alan Holdsworth and Fred Astaire and whatever. Like Iron Maiden looked up to Uriah Heep, but those are all other bands of the same genre, or sometimes not the same genre in the case of Van Halen. But Ritchie Blackmore, it wasn't just other bands, it was foundations of music. He'd be a master in all of those foundations, and he distorted with an electric guitar. And all his lineups of all his bands are dream teams who are just as versed with all of those foundations. And they're not masturbatory about it either. They're very conscious about creating a listening experience to their audience, about making them lose control of themselves and have a tense grin, about closing your eyes very tightly and feeling something and clenching your fist, about just resolving all and consoling all of your life problems when you listen to it, and making you feel that you're not alone in your pain. And then you got songs like like Strange Kind of Loon, which is a very hedonistic vibe, jazzy bopping number. Like they probably made you go through every emotion you can feel in music, the whole spectrum, instead of specializing in one. They created all the functions of it. Well, they didn't create social political conscious, which is why I think they didn't make the headlines in Rolling Stone magazine. But as far as feelings, and they mastered everything. They're just masters. If you're in the mood to party, you can find that in the Deep Purple repertoire. If you're in the mood to be consoled, you can find that in the Deep Purple repertoire. And you're just astonished. You get jaw dropped by how did he think of that? How did he get inspired by that? By the creativity, by the amount of research, by the amount of musical discipline they have. They're the perfect band to look up to. I mean, like a lot of indie bands right now, they borrow from New Age, like from the Depeche Modes and the Talking Heads. They borrow from folk, they borrow from ambient rock and noise rock. But I feel that they're neglecting the jazz, and they're neglecting the more. There's more foundations of music that's being untapped. Even the festivals right now, there's only Crossroads and G3 and whatever, which is only fusion and blues. There's more styles of music. There's Irish folk, there's jazz, there's skiffle, there's classical, there's like when the Beatles came back, they borrowed from Indian music. Like there's other styles that you can be a virtuoso in. And I feel that all the music communities, is because this is what's put in front of them, just fusion and blues, that they're just limited to these sources of inspiration, which kind of gives them less to offer in their own work. I think they just don't want to look for sources. They're just basing their work on what's put in front of them right now. They're not looking for fresh sources of inspiration. They're not planning to have their own twist. They're just placating. They're just satisfied with their level of knowledge and their level of skill.
Well, I'm a 17-year-old aspiring rock and roll fan that's a massive fan of Trip Loon because he really gets his finger is on the pulse. And I've bought a guitar and I've got a couple of mates, we might join a band. What do you tell me?
I tell you, write a listening experience, don't write an aesthetic similarity. I'd say be conscious about your statement, be a complete sensory overhaul to your consumers, be conscious about putting on a great show.
To my consumers?
Yeah, or to your fans, I don't know. But, it's consumer isn't a bad word. But tricking consumers is what's bad. And I think there's a lot of that going on. I think the most people who are being tricked are the tween market because they can't compare it to music of higher standards because they haven't been exposed to it. And they're running the market because they're the highest spenders. Usually, how rock and roll is relevant is different than how certain bands are trying to be relevant like now. Like I know that Beyonce and Lady Gaga made a song about a cell phone. Like that's relevant, I guess. I don't know, Fergie and one of the Black Eyed Peas songs said, "I'm so 2008, you're so 2000 and late." Well, that song lasted for a whole summer. I'm sure it's still relevant in 2009. If the current rock and roll bands right now, they want to stick it to Goldman Sachs. They want to stick it to J.P. Morgan. They want to stick it to all those guys. That's what's relevant. And even with the imagery, the current rock and roll bands, they're still making imagery about Cadillacs or like color TV screens. That's obsolete now. That's not luxurious anymore. Like if you talk about LCD screens, I don't know, or like 3D goggle screens or something like that. I guess that's irrelevant imagery, but I don't know if the current bands are aware of writing imagery like that.
Cell phones, I just heard.
but I'm talking about the world that they're talking about. I mean, that's what relevancy is, man. Like a hero of mine in being relevant, Trey Parker and Matt Stone. Like every episode of South Park, they had the thing about Tom Cruise and Scientology. They talk about all these issues. They talk about stuff that the whole naive sucker society is eating up, and they're just ridiculing the shit out of it. And that's heroic to me. That like exposing the naivety, that's heroic to me. That's the kind of relevant rock and roll is just going against the grain, against what people like. That's the kind of relevancy that I want rock and roll to have. Like not celebrating what and being naive, like in a naive way, being proud of what people are claiming as a thing of their generation, but just attacking the bad things about it and just challenging and provoking the bad things about it. That's relevant. To make a song like Maroon 5, like Move Like Jagger or whatever, and placating to that form of watered down, like poorly produced music, that's not relevant. That's to mold your form of creative expression to what the radio wants. That's not relevant to me. That's not what I think modern is. When you read a lot of YouTube comments and when you go to discussion forums and everything, there's a lot of frustration going on about the current state of music and like the cultural representation of rock and roll, and everybody feels misrepresented by it, and you see all these.
Where everyone feels misrepresented by what?
I mean, like when you look at, like ever since the Ozfest thing started, there was this gloom culture going on, and everybody dressed up, like they're from the Addams Family or something, and there's a lot of people that love rock and roll that don't subscribe to that image or subscribe to that mentality or subscribe to any of that, but yet that's the only representation or exploitation that they have in the culture.
So it's rock and roll's backlash against.
It's not a backlash against one thing. It's a backlash against a lot of things, and it's not really a backlash against current genres of music. It's just a backlash against an absence of what they like. But they don't realize, they're not articulating it that way, so they just say that the other genres are terrible. I don't think it's a revival. Maybe it is a revival. Some people can perceive it that way, but I think it's a natural backlash. And okay, I'll explain it. Ever since the spandex big hair culture in the 80s, people felt that the state of music was embarrassing, and it was too excessive, and it was too silly. So there was a backlash against that, which is that only substance matters, and anything that has to do with image or anything that has to do with silly, behavior or silly mentalities is irrelevant. And it was noble. It was very noble. What mattered was the music, and nothing else mattered. But ever since then, championed by bands like Nirvana and Alice in Chains and Soundgarden and those guys, and then the indie movement happened, and then they rejected spectacle and they rejected all of that stuff. But there has been a saturation of a lot of mediocre indie bands, and there was a lot of substantial indie bands too. But the grand library of what people are exposed to are the mediocre ones. So now you don't have spectacle, and you don't have glamour, and you don't have the party spirit, and you don't have the badass element, and you don't have any of that. Also, you don't have any substance either. So there was a lot of blandness going on. So what happened is that people, for them, there was a starvation for glamour, and there was a starvation for spectacle, and there was a starvation for a party, for the excitement of the party. So two things happened. In order to find it, they resorted to other genres like hip hop or pop and found it over there. Or they had to resort to older music to find it. And then they found it in older music. So right now there's a new backlash of bands that are trying to bring back the party spirit. They're trying to bring back the spectacle. They're trying to bring back the glamour. They're trying to bring back the larger-than-life element. They're trying to bring back the bad boy element. They're trying to bring back the dangerous edge. They're trying to bring back all of that stuff. And it's happening, I think it's happening whether it gets curated and organized or whether it doesn't get too curated and organized, it's still happening.
So then what's your role?
Well, I noticed that a lot of it is too extreme, and a lot of it is slipping, and a lot of it is killing the nobility of it or killing its potential before it's not blowing up right.
According to who?
Well, what I feel, are you familiar with the band Steel Panther?
Yeah, I've seen their advertising up and down the street.
Right. So...
Are they a parody of an 80s
Yes,
band?
they are.
Yeah.
And they're killing any sense of respect that they can have for this backlash.
But are they a parody on purpose? Do they realize that they are a parody? Is it a joke?
They do realize, but that's harming the backlash.
Yeah, good satire harms what it aims at.
Yeah, it harms it, and a lot of people are trying to.
But that is backlashing against the spandex and the 80s. Is that what you want to come back? Is that the area of rock and roll that you're trying to nurture?
Well, what I realize is that there's no balance. I realize that the indie culture completely rejects spectacle and completely, like a lot of the indie culture, completely rejects spectacle, and they reject the larger than life, and they reject the party spirit. They think it's shallow, or they think it's irrelevant. And the bands right now who are trying to bring that in the radar again are only worrying about the image, and they're not worrying about the substance. I have yet to find a band that's epitomizing both.
You see, to me, it sounds a little bit like someone like Lady Gaga could be leading your revival.
I think she is, but it's not in the genre that I love.
Mm-hmm.
It's in a different genre. And like even the hip hop guys revived the party element and the party spirit. But again, it's not the genre that I love and live and breathe and grew up with.
So you want a rock and roll Lady Gaga?
I wouldn't reference Lady Gaga as the first precedent for that. You know, there are bands like Kiss and Van Halen.
Who in the modern musical sphere do you kind of maybe like wish was your own? Was working within like the rock and roll blueprints that you love? Like, are there any musical talents outside that you wish were rock and roll?
I think the song "You and I" by Lady Gaga, like the live version of that, is very like Elton John-esque, you know, without the hip hop production or any of that. And that's a number that's a perfect example of like she definitely has the potential, but I think what she's doing is that she's trying to make her music too accessible to today's music climate, and she's conscious that it's terrible.
I think that the record companies, the record industry, I hope this is actually answering the question, in getting so big, they really are out of touch with anything that's happening or could be happening. I know that somebody at CBS told me about a year ago that everybody up there thinks Elvis Costello is a real far-out avant-garde artist. And that's not the perception now. The perception now is that everybody wants to be a star and everybody wants to make it, and everybody just about is willing to play ball to do so, to get there. And if that means compromising absolutely anything and everything about themselves, whether it's putting on bat wings and black and white makeup or you know, this or that with the songs, I mean, they'll do it. And as long as the artists, the bands take that kind of position of appeasement, which is obvious that most of them are, all you have to do is look at any random bunch of product that comes out, you know, then really, I just think it's really good that there's all these, you know, little independent labels. Not that a lot of the stuff on them isn't garbage too, because, well, most of everything everywhere is garbage, but at least anything alternative, anything really different, has a chance of getting through, and occasionally even does in the industry itself.
She's doing it just to be accessible and to be in the headlines. And
Do you think she has another reason other than profiteering for making her music?
I don't think it's profiteering. I think she's conscious that she's making a movement, and I hope that in her later albums, she does more of those songs.
So do you admire her for that, being someone that wants to create a movement yourself?
No, I don't, because I think that she's legitimizing I think she's and as far as song, not in her singing skill or her performance abilities or anything like that, but in her songwriting skill, I think she's legitimizing that kind of mediocrity.
What do you think the main reason is that in your beloved rock and roll, that you don't have any superstars right now that can carry this torch?
Well, there's several reasons. I mean, all of them are held back. The reason I started this is because I am in a band, and I don't want to be in a music climate or in a music industry or in a game that's rigged against me. So I can either start a band and play against a rigged game, or I can start a new game. Patti Smith was an impresario as well as a musician. So is Lester Bangs. And what I'm trying to be an impresario for, or what I'm trying to, is for a demographic that feel not catered for. And they are a minority, I guess. But
okay. Well, that's great. So so for your how big do you think your demographic is that we're going to make this world for?
Well, so my demographic is a very comparatively and relatively to the rest of the world is very small, but I feel that it has the chance to be as big as everything else. If
can you talk about who your demographic is? Age range, gender, social status, that kind of thing, if you can.
Okay, my demographic are people who like rock and roll. That's it.
Are they aging?
I'd rather, I want it to be youthful, yes.
You want to attract the young. Do you feel that that's the problem that you have the older fans and you're looking for the younger fans?
I thought about that a lot. Well, first to answer it, this isn't about, having music in the private confines of your own room. This is about more than that. This is about a festive air. When I go to order a Philly cheesesteak, or when I go to, when I go to a gas station, I guess it's nice to hear a rock and roll song, and in the air, as well as everything else. I don't know. I want it to be festive.
But it's not. Is it about radio play, or you want to go and see them live, don't you? You want to.
Not only that, like for instance, when people go out in the weekend, I want rock and roll bars and clubs to be just as rampant and just as present as the trance and techno parties and as the hip hop parties and the pop parties and the top 40 parties. I want it to be everywhere. I want people to walk outside with big Puma, sweaters and baggy jeans, and also I'd like an equal amount of population of people like with leather jackets and pins on it and with studs on it. That's what I mean. You want
them to go to the same concert?
No. I just don't want to feel lonely with the world that I live in. I don't want to be cornered. I want it I want that glamour to be in the air, like the rock and roll glamour to be in the air. I want that bohemianism to be everywhere.
Why would a fan feel lonely right here? You're like a kid in Disneyland, aren't you?
No, but
Mickey hasn't been that cool since the 70s. But you go to Disneyland, you love smacking Mickey's hand.
Right, but I feel that there's a guy in Milwaukee now that has the same starvation, and he's not getting his fix.
So you want to take what's here and spread it across America, or it's not here?
No, I don't want to take what's here. This is the thing. Like, if rock and roll parties continue to play the older bands, then there are generations that are attached to those older songs. So when you go, you're going to find, you're not going to find that many youthful people. But if there are new bands that are just as great and that are just as glamorous and that are larger than life and they have the party spirit and they feel tough and they're charismatic and they have that same world of madness that the bands of the past have, the older generations are not going to be attached to it. Only new generations are going to be attached to it. And then you can go out on a weekend and the whole party will be youthful because there are new bands that are doing it.
I feel that that's going to be difficult right now in the overall social atmosphere of the West at the moment. We're living in a time of recession, and we're all paying the debts of a very selfish previous generation, which is the reason that I think that everybody doesn't want endless hedonistic partying, because I think that we realize that it's very damaging to our society in a longer run. And that's probably the reason that it would never gain a large amount of traction, that people in general are, hideously in debt. And
I don't think it was.
New Orleans was
I don't think it's just the debt thing. I think ever since started the war on drugs and everybody got sober, that they stopped wanting to be excessive and hedonistic.
Well, I mean, that's not true, because why are trance parties doing well? Because there's nobody sober at a trance party.
But can you overdose on ecstasy?
Yeah, probably more easily than any drug. Because the ecstasy is the drug you overdose on, really.
Right.
And partly because you don't know what's in it. It's just a pill.
Right.
That's why you go to Amsterdam and you have a machine and it tests it.
And it tests it for you, yeah. Yeah,
Right.
ecstasy is a very dangerous drug. Trance is, much more than you can't...
Well, there you go. That means people are excessive.
Yeah.
That's proof that they are excessive.
But it's not, there's a darkness to it. And they like that and they embrace it.
Well, then...
There's a hiddenness, there's a They wouldn't want it out in the open. There's no one who's a techno person, a trance person, because I just want it on the airwaves. I just want more people to know about it. You're asking, these are the people that are like hipsters or more Gen X, someone with a bit more edge, that hate the idea of commercialization.
Right.
You want to take your thing and to commercialize it.
No, I don't want to commercialize it. I just want it to be...
Well, you want the guy in Milwaukee to hear what you're saying.
Right.
And yet Bobby would be very tentative to even let me know what music he's listening to.
Right.
You know, you want to share. You want it to be out there in the culture. You want other people to embrace it.
I know. I don't want other people to embrace it. I want it to be just as available as all the other festive cultures of music or otherwise are.
How is it not as available?
I don't think it's as available. I think
If
that
you upload it onto YouTube, it's equally as available as everything else.
no, I think that there's a the gloomy presence of the Hot Topic thing that has a presence, but that's not glamorous.
Can you explain
That's
that?
not like when you go to a mall, and there's Hot Topic everywhere.
What's Hot Topic?
It's a clothing store.
And they don't play rock and roll.
No,
Would you want them to play rock and roll?
no. They play depressing and gloomy rock music, and it's a fashion outlet that sells that culture's clothes.
So a big part of this comes down to the basis for a good night out.
Yes.
And okay,
And well, that sounds very trivializing to it. I would call it a happy youth instead of a robbed youth or a misplaced youth.
so this is the correct place to place your youth.
What do you mean with this? You mean here in the Sunset Strip?
Here within the blueprint of rock and roll music.
What blueprint? What are you talking about?
Well, how would we define what comes under what you love and then all of the people that love? So, so let's think of like a rock group that's not rock and roll would be someone like, I don't know, Radiohead. They're not rock and roll, are they?
Right.
And
No, they are.
They are Radiohead rock and roll?
They're yeah, you can call it rock and roll.
Well, they're the biggest selling album in, like,
And they're great,
in the
and
world.
they're very substantial. But can you?
Then,
But
then we don't have then there's no great issue with Radiohead art because they're the most lauded and
that's true.
a
But
Coldplay rock and roll.
yes.
U2, Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Well, I mean, rock and roll is a semantic. Like Keith Richards in his book says, there's a lot of rock music these days, but there's no there's the role. We don't have the role. We don't have the role.
What does he mean?
Well, you have to ask him. I mean,
Have we got the role? Do you think we have the role?
What do you
I don't know what he means by that, and I can't define it, and it's a tricky semantic. But
Let's talk about something.
no, I want to answer that.
Yeah, go on.
What matters to me is Radiohead a wild party spirit? Is Coldplay a wild party spirit?
The Red Hot Chili Peppers are.
You can dance to it. I mean, Jamiroquai, you can dance to it, but Jamiroquai doesn't say that he brushes his teeth with Jack Daniels. Kesha
Yeah,
says
but,
that. Is it as wild and party spirit like Van Halen? Which one's more balloons and confetti and joyous cheerfulness and whatever? Which one has more of that? Which one's more festive with that?
So so we need more joyous. We need more joyous party music coming from guitar. Okay.
Like when you like in the contemporary music library of rock and roll, you have Seven Nation Army, and you have Jets, Are You Gonna Be My Girl, and you have The Darkness, I Believe in a Thing Called Love. That's like 12 minutes of playlist. What do you have to fill the rest of the 8 hours with?
I thought you loved that Swedish group that just came out the other day.
Graveyard?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love them, but I don't know if I can party to them. Like I think it's heavy, and you can like have a tense grin and bang your head to
What
it.
about
And it's,
Bon Jovi Always?
I never heard Always. I know his masterpieces. Are
Okay,
classics.
so it's difficult a little bit, but so a lot of what the blueprint of rock and roll. Okay, to explain what I mean a little bit more by the blueprint is certain musical types were laid down by former generations on which we are now building. So it is only because of B.B. King that the Rolling Stones exist, and it's only because the Rolling Stones' darkness exists and that you're sitting here. Roughly?
No, I think that ever since the beginning of time, not the beginning of time, but ever since in early civilizations when, people would go to a fair and, some jester stands over a wooden platform and does, and he does like magic tricks or throws like fire or juggles or whatever, and everybody's enamored by the spectacle, like, yay, like, that's the feeling, that's the element that's missing, not only in the genre of rock and roll, but I think it's present, but it's not abundant in all the genres.
But if is rock and roll, because I want to move away from the party bit of it.
Okay.
Is rock and roll essentially based on blues and folk, isn't it?
It's based on
Where does it come? It comes from like a blues. And
Chuck Berry, or Elvis, or Jerry Lee Lewis, or Bill Haley and the Comets based it on country and blues and folk. Yeah, but I mean, like later bands like Thin Lizzy have Irish folk mixed in with it, and and Deep Purple like mixed in jazz, and like Ozzy Osbourne, his solo career has Randy Rhoads that mixed in classical. It's guitar music. But like. It's tricky to define. I guess.
There's something with blues and folk music and like country and a lot of the ones that you were talking about to begin with, is that they all grew out of great struggle a lot of the time, and that's sometimes where their substance came from. And when you're asking for it to push towards the party side, and then you're wondering why, when it's purely celebrating, it's losing its substance.
No, I think there's a difference between substance in craft and depth in meaning. I don't think they're the same thing. I think you can have substance in craft and party music. It's not going to have depth and meaning or consoling things to you or like philosophical, profound elements, but you can have substance in it. I think that Ike and Tina Turner have a lot of substance in their party songs more than Kesha has substance in her party songs.
Is Kesha the girl with the dollar thing in?
Yeah.
No, you see, I don't know, man. That's really good. Because I've got an 18-year-old sister, and she's trying to say it's the same thing that like Bowie was saying. The same thing. She's just celebrating dirty jeans and smoking. The
values she sings about and the statements she has are the same. And
so
it speaks to people. It speaks to people psychologically, but I'm talking about the craftsmanship of the songwriting
itself. Is that what substance means?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
So what about Adele as a songwriter then? She's only 21.
I think she's a great singer. I haven't heard a lot of her music, so I couldn't be a good judge of that. But I think she's great in singing.
How important is your costume, what you're wearing now? How important is it?
Well, I mean, how do we create that glamorous vibe? How do we create that stylish, bohemian self-declaration thing, that sense of belonging?
Especially in such an ugly city. See, Bohemia is a word from a very beautiful place. Bohemia is a very beautiful place.
Right.
Surrounded by...
Have you seen the movie Stoned?
No.
Okay, have you seen the movie The Doors?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Okay, so did you see the part when Jim Morrison talks to Andy Warhol?
Yeah, potentially. Okay.
Right. Did you see how everybody was like and how everybody was dressed and how everybody was that vibration? Did you see the Runaways?
Mm-hmm.
Did you see the part when Kim Fowley discovers the Runaways in that party at the English disco? It's an exciting world to be inside, right? It's bohemian. It's glamorous.
It's not really bohemian.
Well, think of it this way.
Is it? Is it bohemian? It's not bohemian to what like a European thinks bohemian.
Would you like to meet a girl that looks nice and looks great and looks sexy, or would you want everybody to be fratty and slobby, and then, like?
No, it's good. That's good. I tell you get your costumes, like you get them made.
I think it's trivial to say fashion or costume. But what those costumes and fashions, what the statement behind it is what matters. Like if you're dressing with a leather jacket that has spikes and spins on them, that means you're rough. That means you're badass. That means you're dangerous. That's what matters. It's not the trivial fabric of the thing that you're putting on your body. It's the statement that it says.
But do you think that the word costume is correct? Do you think it's playing dress up to a certain degree?
I don't think it's something that matters ultimately at the end. I mean, I think it matters with bands because they're creating that entertainment factor, and they have to be visual to be like a sensory overhaul to in every way, hearing, looking, smelling, feeling, touching, like complete sensory overhaul. I think it's necessary with bands. Fans, they can do whatever they want. Like,
which one are you? You're not a fan. Well, you are a fan, obviously, but you're more than that. You're a professional fan. You're creating this platform.
I mean, I'm wearing jeans and a shirt right
Today
now.
you are, but I mean, I've seen your nipples more times than my own girlfriend. And you are something, you're more like a professional fan, aren't you? You need to dress to represent the cause that you're working
Right.
towards. So
I don't really think of it that way. I don't really think of it that way.
You say to me, for example, you know, you need to look like rock and roll, sharp, look smart.
No, but I don't dress because I'm a professional. I don't do it because of that. I just do it because I like to self-declare myself as a fan of rock and roll or a person of rock and roll.
And you want everyone to know.
Yeah, I don't want everyone to know. I just feel like I'm not the person I am without that type of clothing. I just feel dorky without it. I don't feel cool dressing and looking boring.
Does it define you?
I don't think it defines me. It just makes me feel more comfortable with my identity, but it doesn't define me. Like, I can go to IHOP wearing my sweatpants and flip-flops because I'm lazy, but I'm not going to freak out about it.
He was the first to play records by Blondie, the Ramones, Sex Pistols, and Nirvana, to name a few.
It's unbelievable that someone could be in the music business this long and help so many people just be in it because they love the music.
He was accepted by the Rolling Stones. He was accepted by the Beatles. He was accepted by the Monkees.
Rodney Bingenheimer.
You were the kid that everybody beat up on the way to high school.
Right. This is the tour of the Bingenheimer Manor. Here's a letter I got from Bill Clinton. Elvis Presley's driver's lessons. Brooke Shields' hangar.
Rodney tells you you're a star.
The Sunset Strip scene of the mid-'60s was probably the most creative convergence of people in the history of LA.
There were hundreds of kids on the street, half-naked girls all over the place, and I felt like I was part of a revolution.
How did you meet Rodney?
I stalked him.
Is that amazing or what?
But let's talk about you.
Why did the celebrities glom on this guy that around here people would just kind of make fun of?
Well, I'm the designated driver between the famous and the not so famous.
He just seemed very genuine. You didn't have to wonder what was his ulterior motive.
Sonny and Cher were kind of like my mom and my dad.
It seems like he should be this huge mogul.
Rodney's the Prince and the Pauper.
Would you like to have the money?
I wouldn't mind.
Could you use it?
Sure.
Rodney Bingenheimer sits there. He can hardly even pick up a baked bean, and he's wearing like a t-shirt and jeans, and yet you think he's the coolest man in the world. It's nothing to do with the clothes.
Well, he also drives a certain car that has a lot of style, and I think his clothes also has a lot. The blazers he wears and the hairstyle he has, I think it's pretty stylish. We have a huge PR crisis because there's an episode of South Park where there's like goths who are angry at vampires, and the goths and the vampires, and you look at that and you're like, that's the image and reputation of what a rock and roller is. We have a huge PR crisis. You know, the image of the rock and roller, people like Cheech and Chong or Wayne and Garth or Bill and Ted, or those guys were personalities that was fun to be around, that was cheerful, that always loved to smile. But the people don't know that. Like, the modern day people don't know that. They think the rocker is like the depressing guy and the guy that just wants to miserate, and we have a lot to do to repair that image.
That this planet hasn't even seen its golden age. Everybody says it's finished. Oh, art's finished, rock and roll is dead.
This is my chance on the world. I didn't live back there in Mesopotamia. I wasn't there in the Garden of Eden. You know, I wasn't there with Emperor Han. I'm here right now, and I want right now to be the greatest time. This is my golden age. This is our golden age. I'm not there in the past. I'm not there in the future. I'm right here, and this is the time to make it great. And if each generation would realize that the time to be great is right now when they're alive. You see what I mean? The time to flower is now.
Yes. Patti Smith wrote for Rolling Stone, and she wrote for a lot of magazines, and she organized a lot of poetry sessions in the Lower East Side, and she assembled and gathered and organized and
But she was
promoted.
a struggling poet herself, and people gathered behind her poetic voice. That's very different from being a fan of poetry and trying to gather other fans. She became a leading punk poet, and then gave a shelter to her followers.
That's true.
Which is very much what we have here at the Sunset Strip. I think it's been built by a lot of these icons that you love, and it now houses a lot of their fans. So where is the resistance that through this bed we don't have the new rising talent?
That's a good question. This absence of substance and absence of talent is a humongous problem, not only in our time. I think it's been the case ever since the beginning of talent scouting. But you got to remember that, a lot of Neil Kay was the impresario behind Iron Maiden and behind, all the new wave of British heavy metal bands. When he discovered those bands, when he discovered Iron Maiden, he heard the demo tapes, which doesn't sound anything like Number of the Beast, which is their masterpiece classic album. But he saw something that in them, that he believed that they could do something as masterful as Number of the Beast. The same case with Tom Zutaut. When he saw Guns N' Roses, when you see the demo tapes of Hollywood Roses, it doesn't sound anything like Appetite, but again, it's that he can do something like Appetite. So I'm going to get some talent developers in the form of producers and in the form of PR people and in the form of everything to kind of nurture them and push them and develop them.
When the fans are not following Iron Maiden to the live gigs, they can be found at heavy metal discos like Neil Kay's Bandwagon in North London. More than 1,000 heavy metal fans make the pilgrimage to the Bandwagon every week, and getting played there has been important for Iron Maiden in building up a devoted following. But before Kay turned it into the heavy metal soundhouse, the Bandwagon featured disco music 5 nights a week.
I even have atomic scientists, trainee scientists that I know of that are regular members of this place that still are into hard rock. But one shouldn't presuppose that just because one is a headbanger that one has only one sort of situation in life. That's totally false. They come from all walks of life, and most part they're totally honest people. It took 5 years really of very, very hard work and a lot of persistence to change the whole situation around. These days, as you're well aware, we run 5 nights a week hard rock.
Appetite for Destruction was released. I found Guns N' Roses 30 years ago. It took 2 years to develop that band and make that record. It takes an incredible amount of patience. Everybody wants to make a record right away, and they just want to jump out there and do it. And if you want to make music history, you have to get it right. I went and told the president of the company that I thought he was wrong and that the record hadn't even really started yet. And I went up to the owner of the company's office back when real people owned record companies and decided to spend money on developing talent. And I said, this record hasn't even started yet.
And do you think that the talent scouts now, they're just, they're too much in it for money, not for music, or what's the reason that?
Well, Tom Zutaut is an example of someone who works for an existing giant company that has a lot of influence. But in the case of Neil Kay wasn't a part of a company. He was just an owner of a club. And there's several examples. Some impresarios were in the form of radio DJs. Some in the form of magazine owners and writers. Some in the form of critics. I mean, you have to be specific what you mean by talent scouts. What you mean impresarios?
What do you mean by impresario?
Well, an impresario is someone who pushes a roster of talents and brings a huge draw of subscribers to
Someone
those
like
talents.
Mark Ronson? Or at a cooler scale, or someone like Simon Cowell at a more negative pop scale? Men like that? Is it Simon Cowell an impresario?
I mean, he's an impresario of great singers, but I don't know if he's an impresario of great songwriters.
Yeah, no, I think Simon Cowell's probably a big part of the problem with the music industry. There's a phenomenon going on like Web 2.0, whatever it is, like user-generated content, and as you were talking about earlier, like YouTube comments were something that you were noticing, you were managing to get a vibe from the internet through the fact that anyone can get their voice heard. Now more than ever, we have, certainly in England, like Lily Allen and people, they just put their videos up on YouTube, and the public voted for what they want literally by the amount of hits she gets.
Right.
In some ways, it seems like right now we have the most even, the fairest marketplace that we've ever had in the history of music.
That's true.
So why do you think that the quality is struggling?
Well, this is not an answer to your question, but it paves the way for the answer to your question.
Cool.
The internet is a pull medium. It's not a push medium. You know, when you walk outside and you see a huge banner, that's a push medium. That you didn't research it, but you found out about that because somebody pushed it to you. Like, the internet is something that requires you to be curious and to look for something and then find it and then subscribe to it. And like 1/3 of the people of the world are interested in culture, 1/3 of it are too busy and they only want to listen to the people they want to listen to, and the other third don't care. So sure, it is fair, but it's still a different way to play the game.
Why aren't we seeing breakout stars from the rock and roll world? Is there the appetite for it?
I think that the public interest is conditioned to, I don't know if it's conditioned, but I think that everybody praises talent based on their performative abilities instead of their creative abilities. So singers are hailed as great talents. So, you know, like maybe American Idol was a part of that. Maybe American Idol got everybody in a mania of being a great singer and finding a great singer. I don't know. I can't answer that question. I haven't thought about it that much.
That's very interesting. So it's something that happens a lot in the art world. It's whether it's the idea or the execution, which one is more important. And you think that the world is now too hung up on the execution more than the idea?
I haven't thought about that. No, I don't know how to answer that. I haven't thought about it. But what I'm trying to say is that to really observe the psychology of societies and the psychology of consumers is I think it is really important to know. I mean, it helps us to play the game better. Like, for instance...
But treat them as if they are more basic than that, and if they just click on what they like, and then just move on, as if it's no major sociological change for them, and they're just clicking, sharing on what they like and moving on. And the average 17-year-old girl or 17-year-old boy is probably sharing 150 videos a month, or whatever, you know, clicking 150 likes.
I don't know if this is... I think that's great, and I think that people are satisfied with that. That's great. But like, I feel that my cause and what I'm trying to be an impresario for, or what I'm trying to is for a demographic that feel not catered for. What I'm saying is that I don't want to go to Bob Dylan and tell him to be like Kiss. I don't want to do that. I don't have any problem with any bands, and I don't want any band to change. I'm just trying to campaign the bands that are doing that that have the industry rigged against them that tells them what you're doing is not relevant.
Okay, that's great. Who are those bands?
Well, you have, first of all, you have a band like Hammered Satin. They're doing something glamorous. And you have a band like Prima Donna who are doing something glamorous. But every time they go up to a radio station or they go up to any of those people, everybody's like too skeptical about it. Everybody's like a cynic towards it. They're like, no, we don't like...
Well, Hammered Satin good? Be honest. Do you think they deserve their place in the charts? Do you think that they deserve to be above Adele, Gaga, Radiohead? Do you think they deserve to be above these guys?
I think they offer something that the other ones don't. I don't think anything's better or worse.
Well, how can you help them?
Well...
How can we help them?
That's where the impresario part comes in. Right now there's a demand for this. This backlash is more in the form of a demand. It's not in the form of supply. Because the artists who can supply that are afraid to do it. They're embarrassed about it. There's so much spin and there's so much public perceptions that are against them. There's nobody building a case against those public perceptions or those or that spin that makes them say it's okay. Like, look, when Lady Gaga popped out, everybody thought she was a joke. But then everybody started building a case for her. No, she writes her own stuff. No, she's very creative. No, and then people started accepting her.
For me, there's nothing other than the fact that somebody showed me the Bad Romance video. And that song Bad Romance.
I think when she started out, there was a lot of people that are saying Lady Gaga and like a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, me too. And I think her work speaks for itself.
She was accused of being an attention whore. She was accused of gimmickry. She was accused of all that, and then it slowly started to fade away, and there was more public acceptance towards it.
You need somebody that can write a song as good as Bad Romance.
I don't think Bad Romance. I think Bad Romance is a terrible song.
That's not true, but that's fine. We can differ on it. But you need somebody that can write a song you don't have. You need a rock and roll song as good as that. It would spread along the Sunset.
I honestly think that Lady Gaga, Kesha, Lil Wayne, all those bands did not go to the radar.
On that song on the Radiohead album In Rainbows, yeah. If someone wrote a rock and roll song as good as that, it would spread across the Sunset Strip like wildflower. It would be on all of the LA.
Again. I think you're confusing. I think you're confusing great entertainment with great songwriting. I don't think Bad Romance is a great song. I don't think Kesha's songs are great. What people are eating up is the entertainment value of it, not the songwriting value of it. There's a huge distinction. Let me tell you something. I would argue that Basement Jaxx and the Gorillaz and Jamiroquai have pop songs that are much better than Lady Gaga. And Moby, they have songs much better than Lady Gaga. But the reason why they aren't as big is because they don't have the spectacle and they don't have the equal entertainment value as those guys. Because they're just about the music. Well, the Gorillaz have a fantasy element towards them, but...
Okay, well, the Gorillaz are a cartoon band, so
right.
Funny. But also the Gorillaz is Damon Albarn, yeah? He's
fantastic.
Yeah, he is
He's great.
He is the number one adult music star in England.
Okay, and would you acknowledge that his songwriting is better than Gaga's? I would not hesitate to say that. Why isn't he as big?
That's a question of universality, like what you were talking about, creating something.
Well, yeah, Lady Gaga is much nichier. AC/DC sold more than Lady Gaga.
He doesn't want to be in the headlines.
That doesn't. But AC/DC are not in the headlines.
AC/DC had.
We're doing sound bites for him. We can't start getting too ugly.
No, but I do feel like if we jump in a little bit every now and then, AC/DC had the best-selling tour when they started touring again. So.
But they're not in the headlines as much as Gaga is.
You want headlines?
I want it to be festive everywhere. Yeah.
Biggest grossing tour.
Yeah.
I think it's in a top 5.
Paris Hilton has one of the most headlines of any people.
Exactly. Why? Because she's a wild party animal. Yeah, let's get to the profound stuff.
I have been trying. Have I not been trying? I have been trying to get you towards why. Where is the market? How are we going to create?
Well, then ask that question.
How can something be counterculture when it's also like so commercial and you want to bring up such?
Well, again, that's a tricky semantic. Counterculture to me means backlash.
But backlash has a negative connotation.
Right. I mean, if you want to define it literally, I think it's a backlash against, I don't know, unfair stuff or rigged stuff or not, like lack of stuff or...
Lack of what? What is it? Okay, what is it? Okay, for a start, help me out here. Who is the number one rock and roll act on the party scene right now that I don't know about, that are the best, that deserve this?
There are
Who
none.
are you fighting for? Who's the number one? Just give me the name.
There are none. I'm saying there's a demand for it. I'm not saying there's a supply for it yet.
Yeah, there's a demand for better movies, better literature, bigger tits. You know?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. That's true.
So what is it that you are trying to do with Soul Parade? What is it you're trying to do with this documentary? We know there's a demand. Someone's just got to stop fucking masturbating to YouPorn and playing Call of Duty and actually just sit down and just play guitar as much as Keith Richards played guitar, and you just got to hope that that man's got the soul. You know, like, all of this is just the fluff.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay. I'm going to talk a lot and explain all your curiosities right now.
Do it, Drake. That's all I want.
Okay. The Olympia, Washington scene and the Seattle scene circa 1980-something, they had a scene there. They had the Melvins. They had everybody, right? But if Seattle blew up during the mid-'80s or the late 80s, it would blow up prematurely because the scene was underdeveloped. But it had a place, it had an underground where it could develop itself, where it could grow, where it could experiment, where it could troubleshoot until they figure out a product that they can deliver. And then once that product happens, then they're ready for the debut. So what I'm trying to do with Soul Parade is that I'm trying to build an underground network of the bands who are trying to figure that out, who are trying to experiment with it. I want to guide them. Not guide them, but bring them together, that people who can guide them. I want to bring them together with producers. I want to bring them together with people who are interested in seeing their shows. I want to bring them together. So I want to build that underground platform until they can, until a Nirvana comes, until a Soundgarden comes, until or in the case of punk, until a Sex Pistols comes or Ramones comes. And then it can blow up. But I think it's too soon to make it blow up now, because that would be premature. Like I said, Seven Nation Army, Are You Gonna Be My Girl, I Believe in a Thing Called Love, 15 minutes of playlist. We still have to supply the 8 hours of the night. We still have to build a library for that. We still have to bring together the bands with the producers so their songs can, their musicianship can be whipped into shape. Their substance rises, the level of all of that. When that happens, then we can start our own festival. Then we can start a magazine that goes above ground instead of just an internet level and report about this. Then we can have banners.
What makes you different than a Simon Cowell? Because now this means you're like molding them as well.
Well, Simon Cowell is a TV show host. He's not behind the scenes nurturing and harnessing them.
He's only recently dropped out at the very, very top of the game. He stepped in front of the camera for a little bit.
Right.
He is but that's beside the point. I think that was really good. I think that was awesome.
Here's what I want to say. Soul Parade is not promising the next Led Zeppelin. They're not promising the next, I'm not going to sell the bands that I showcase in Soul Parade as the next Led Zeppelin or the next Van Halen or the next Guns N' Roses. The audience of Soul Parade are not people who are expecting that. Is it going to generate interest for the people who are following up on this movement, for the bands that want to showcase themselves in this movement, for the progress of this movement? Yes, it's going to generate interest for the people who are interested in that. But it's not going to fulfill that starvation or that frustration.
Okay, I've got a little I mean, I don't want to be probing more. There's a problem I think that we're going to be missing here, which is that Soul Parade is meant to draw bands to it, and I think you're being too negative about what's here. Can you say some stuff like, I've seen some shoots of grass that are going to grow, and I've seen positive signs of re-emergence? I really think that we need some of that shit. So if I say to you, for example, how long have you been in LA?
A year.
Yeah.
I've been in LA for a year.
Right. Would you say that the Sunset Strip is still the center of rock and roll in the world?
I don't think there is a center of rock and roll in the world anywhere. There could be if there were people like Kel Calco, and if there were people like, there were impresarios in every city that play what they want and control their own parties and curate and organize and assemble, then every city in anywhere in the world could be a center. And then there could be a touring circuit where bands can tour in all those places, and they would self-sustain themselves financially. And they would see a point because there's a platform for it, instead of placating to what the industry trend is now and compromising their own creative freedom so that they can be accessible.
Are we not very close to a platform for it, right here, just up the hill? Is the Roxy, I filmed stuff in the Roxy for you, that's a great platform, that's a brilliant stage.
Well, it's a physical venue for it, but I don't think the Roxy is an institution that wants to make profit. They're going to put people on the bill that do this genre on Monday, and they're going to put these people on the bill that brings that kind of people on Tuesday.
They do rock and roll, essentially, don't they?
The Roxy and those places charge the bands. They charge the bands and they charge the customers.
They charge the bands if you can't have a guaranteed draw.
That it depends on the deal. That's true, but I don't think the Roxy or the Whiskey are.
Are there some bands that you've seen at the moment that you admire that are selling out the Roxy that you think might break out?
Yes, I think all the bands that are, all the talent roster that I'm assembling are.
Can we talk about some of them? Who are your most recent signing?
I'm not signing.
No, not signing. Who are the people that you would
curate?
Most like to curate, to interview, to get onto your blog. To.
Well, yeah, like.
No, forget that. Who gives you the best night out?
Okay, first I want to talk about the Roxy and the Whiskey and the Viper Room. The Roxy and the Whiskey and the Viper Room are not curators. They're just people that are providing any band a chance to perform there. They're not curating quality, or they're not curating these type of bands that fulfill that kind of demand. They're not curators. Curators are people like Kel Calco. Curators are, or in older history, curators are people like Rodney Bingenheimer or Neil Kay or Alan Freed or Wolfman Jack or Malcolm McLaren or any of those guys. Those are curators. And the difference between a curator and a general promoter is that a curator listens to something that he believes should be showcased and wants to turn people onto it. Whereas a general promoter doesn't care. A general promoter only cares about getting a draw.
Yeah, one's a businessman and one is like an artist manager, as such. But there's no way that Malcolm McLaren... There's no way that Malcolm McLaren wasn't in it for the money to a degree.
Well, they were all businessmen and impresarios in the same time, because you need that to make the impresario endeavors work.
I mean, how can this be a good example to children?
Well, people are sick everywhere. People are sick and fed up of this country, telling them what to do.
But not getting paid for it.
Pardon?
But not getting paid for putting on that sort of public show.
Well, nor are we. We ain't even being allowed to play.
It's just sick, isn't it?
In fact, you're acting as spokesman for the group today.
Yes, indeed.
Have you stopped them from talking to us?
Not at all. They're just so disgusted by having to answer so many questions about something so simple.
Do you feel the publicity following the Thames television interview has been damaging, or do you think it's helped you?
I don't think it's been damaging, far from it. Whether it's helping us is another matter. The point is, people are getting very discontented by the fact that kids who have bought and purchased tickets of these venues that are now being cancelled are having to travel further afield to see the band of their choice.
Tell me more, who gives you the best night out on the Sunset Strip? What's the way to, which band will give you the best party? Who should we go and see live that will get us rocking, get our blood boiling?
I can't promise you that you'll get rocking and get your blood boiling, but I can promise you that you're going to see an interesting phenomena that might grow into something great.
Who are these guys that are doing this?
Prima Donna, Hammered Sets, The Nuclears, Purple Melon, The Last Vegas, The Darkness.
These boys, are they getting close to forming a movement, do you think? Is there momentum gathering?
They're kind of in nowhere land right now, without a platform. They don't have a festival to go to. They don't have a magazine that focuses on reporting or spotlighting them. They don't have anything. They don't have a platform. They have on small scales like Calcalco.
Well, they do. They also have the Soul Parade, yeah.
Hopefully. I mean, that's what I'm trying to start. But as I said, on an underground level. And it's good that it's on an underground level.
Why?
Because it shouldn't blow up prematurely.
If there was just one guy, if there was just one band as good as Led Zeppelin, it would all blow up.
If there were 5 bands as good as Led Zeppelin, it would blow up. The reason I say that is because Red Hot Chili Peppers, if there were 5 bands like Red Hot Chili Peppers, then they would start like a reinvented surf rock, a Venice Beach culture or something. And then there's going to be a lot of bands that are smaller bands that, you know what I mean? But if it's just one unit, like, it would be just one unit.
Do you think there might be...
I think that, okay, nobody would care about Rat. Nobody would care about Round and Round or Lay It Down or any of those songs if the Scorpions and Van Halen and Iron Maiden didn't pave the way for a band like Rat. Nobody would care about Dinosaur Jr. if Soundgarden and Nirvana and Alice in Chains paved the way for bands like Dinosaur Jr. Yeah. Right now, we have a lot of Dinosaur Juniors. We have a lot of Rats.
Who are the guys that we're getting behind? Who are we championing? And why? What are they doing right? What do they need to do? How can you help them? How do we get this movement started? Right, I'm a believer. Here we go. Let's do it. What is it that we need to do? Let's do it.
I don't think that we're championing an existing case study or an existing band. I think we're championing a vision.
Sure. Who's going to be on your blog next month, mate? Who's going to be on your blog the month after that? How do we build the brand Trip? We need to get people behind them because you believe in certain people.
No, because I'm not selling a product. I'm developing a movement.
Who's in it? Just you? Who else is in it? Tell me someone else who's in it.
Well, first
tell me why they're good. As great as your breakdown was just then about Let's Guns and stuff, tell me an anecdote about the Nasty Souls, about the time they're one of their little things that sounds different and it made you go, yeah! Or tell me something about Hammered Satin that made you fucking, when you were at the front thing and the first time the Hammered Satin guy caught your eye, and tell me that story.
Well, I was once at a Hammered Satin show, and I saw him with his wacky eyes and his animated Dick Dastardly mannerisms. It's madness, and I love that madness. And it's great to see a rock and roll band doing that, finally. It's great. It's great to see bands that look like, that have sex appeal, that have glamour, that have balls. You know, it's great to see bands that aren't like boring presentation and the next song is. It's great to see bands like that.
Who else has got that? Who else gets you that excited?
I like the Nuclears, like Nick Vivid. He has that hormonal, very messy, energetic, jumping all over the place and jumping on and staying up in the face of the crowd and yelling at their face and going back up on stage, and he makes people lose their shit because everybody feels like they're not sitting still. Everybody feels like they want to go mad. That's great.
So I think you've got to take the approach that we're building momentum, we're looking for breakout acts, it's an exciting time. I think you've got to take that approach. Otherwise, I don't know what we're selling. I'm just too.
We're not selling anything. We're developing a movement.
It's because he's Saudi and they've got oil. Sell shit. They've got the product. The rest of us are all just trying to sell products we don't have in our world.
Okay,
you're not just promoting because you're kind of talking about being them one specific thing. You really want them to be this one thing because otherwise they're either not good enough.
No, I'm
Isn't
not.
It like normally.
I don't want. No, I don't.
These aren't good enough. We've all seen them. I'm moving. I'm shaking.
But
I'm
no,
moving.
like I'm just trying to say like. There's something they do and somebody catches on to like what it.
No, but I just want to correct you about something. I'm not trying to make bands anything. I'm seeing bands that are fulfilling a demand, and then I'm campaigning them. But I'm not making other bands anything, and I don't want to make any band anything. I just want to supply a certain demand.
But you wish they were something else, because you say they're not there yet.
No, I don't wish anybody's anything else. But the bands who are attempting to deliver, I want to develop them. Yes, I want to give them some talent developments. I want to hook them up with producers until they are a product that is satisfying to the demand that exists.
Have producers. Pretty good.
Yeah,
you give them to like Mighty Mouse and.
I don't know.
The pop producers are.
No, the thing is that there's a difference between a producer that helps you make a hit and a producer that helps you develop a masterpiece. A hit is something that's accessible to the radio and accessible to the billboards, that would be popular too quickly. A masterpiece is something that makes you lose control and close your eyes and wobble your head.
But a masterpiece is often both. If something is a masterpiece,
I don't think it's often both. No, I think that. Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You is not a hit, and it's a masterpiece. I think that Child in Time by Deep Purple is a masterpiece, but it's not a hit. Smoke on the Water is a hit. I want a producer that helps band make masterpieces, not necessarily hits.
What about the Black Keys?
I think they're fantastic, but I don't. But the Black Keys backlash against mediocrity. They didn't backlash against mundaneness and boredom. So that's why they come off very like normal people with instruments. They don't come off as rock stars, but they're very substantial, and they're backlashing against Nickelback and those people who are mediocre.
If you make something great because it comes from the very notion of backlash means that he gave a shit about Nickelback when he wrote his song. I think he was just in the basement with his one friend.
No, the latest issue of Rolling Stone has a quote from the drummer of the Black Keys saying that he hates Nickelback, and that's the reason he wanted to make a point that rock and roll can be great, and he wanted to make a point that he doesn't want people to think that Nickelback is the greatest band in the world and ruin rock and roll. I can quote you. I can go to the article.
So they have a hip hop producer called Mighty Mouse that has just done their new album.
I'm not familiar with that story.
How do you feel about genre crossover?
It helps people tap their feet and shake their hips, which is ultimately what the listener should feel. It helps that body reaction happen. That's great.
Cool.
What's so good about the Black Keys?
They're soulful. They're extremely soulful. They have
just answer to me, sorry, because it's just gonna be so
they're soulful. They have great craftsmanship. They're great at songwriting. They're great. They have a lot of substance.
Are they better than the White Stripes?
I think that Jack White feels more like the lineage that I talked about. He feels more like a lineage of the Rolling Stones and Humble Pie and the Faces and Foghat and Eric Clapton and those guys. He feels more like rock and roll, but I enjoy the Black Keys songs more as songs. But I think that Jack White feels more like rock and roll to me.
Who's the number one of all of them? Who's the man who, if you could buy a drink for anybody, who would it be? Just pat him on the back and tell him you changed my life. Who's that man?
All the bands that I love, all the bands in these Cream magazines and this Cream compilation, you know.
Cream magazine was our Facebook. It was our social media.
I lived by what was printed in Cream magazine.
It was a rock magazine with a capital R.
Most people want to fit in somewhere. I wasn't going to find him in my high school. I found him in Cream magazine.
None of them had any business running, editing, or writing for a rock magazine.
We're going to introduce everybody.
Hi, what's happening?
Barry always had an explosive temper.
Got a newspaper to get out?
I had no credentials at all.
We were this team of people who were all a little off.
To put it in like a band comparison, that's when the band happened.
Cream magazine being based in Detroit gave it the grit.
If you live in the Midwest, it's not all laid back and peace and love and good vibes.
In 1971, the Rolling Stone party line was that the next big thing was James Taylor. Many teenagers went to Cream to learn about noisier stuff.
Lester Bangs and I started the same day.
He kind of liked going against the grain. What's popular? You guys suck.
Take Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Here is like musical sterility at its pinnacle.
There's no parallel for it in the rest of rock journalism. It was not a magazine that was about rock and roll. Rock and roll was taking place at the magazine.
Everybody was politically incorrect. That's what made Cream so good. He told the truth.
50 years after Cream's first issue published, it still stands for something. Either you're in on the joke or you are the joke.
America's only rock and roll magazine. Yeah.
What era is it for rock and roll then?
The greatest era for rock and roll is the late 60s and 70s. Arguably,
what
the
age are we
early
in
80s.
now? Are we in the gold era?
We're like in the foil era, you know, the rusted tin era.
You've got to say we're not in the gold era.
No, we're not. But we're not in the golden era. No, of rock and roll. We're not in the golden era of rock and roll.
What era are we in?
We're in the golden era of TV dramas. I don't know. Yeah, we're in the golden era of.
Are you jealous?
Huh?
Are you jealous of HBO fans and you wish that?
No, I'm not, because I'm enjoying it just as much. But I don't care for TV as much as I care for rock and roll.
Okay. If this interview was a film script and someone gave it to me, I would say that there's a problem, that there's not enough at stake and there's not enough conflict. That would be that's what I would say to their draft of script.
You want conflict?
I want more to be at stake, and I want more. There's.
What's at stake?
There's a whole heritage of music here that's not being represented, and it's a fucking tragedy that the line has gone from B.B. King through the bloods of Keith Richards, like snook, and then there's no one to pick it up this mantle now. Like, who is gonna da? Like, it's a fucking tragedy. No fucking Adele can go and eat her hamburgers, and Lady Gaga can go and screw her gay best friends. Like, who the fuck is here right now? That's kind of a little bit what I want. I don't want to hear that, yeah, Lady Gaga's good. No, Bad Romance not that good. What do you think? No, fucking hate Bad Romance for all I care. I don't really like Bad Romance. You know, it's like, I was just trying to get shit from you.
I want to say this, though. Okay? I think that in the late 60s and 70s, most of the radio stations were independent. And most of the radio DJs played what they wanted to turn you on to. So that's why there was a conscious curation of quality, which made music, not only rock and roll, which made soul and blues, funk, and everything curated in a very, like, they just curated to the highest standard. That's why it was a great era. But ever since MTV happened, it was a mono source, and they were the mono filter. And they were the gatekeeper, and they gave a revolution to mediocrity because their criteria was visual appeal instead of substance. I don't think pop has people like Michael Jackson, or like Madonna, or like Prince. I don't think that they have that quality. They're all mediocre. Like Gorillaz, Basement Jacks, they're fantastic, but they're like a crossover between pop and indie. The house, you know, that genre of house music, you know why it was called house? It was called house because club owners and bars never wanted to play that music because they thought it was too obscure and it would bore customers. And it's not familiar enough for people to attract customers to come to the bars. So the people who love that music started those parties in their houses. So that's why it was called house music. And when they got a huge draw over there, the club owners were like, "Oh, you got that many customers to come to your house party?" And they're like, "Yeah." They're like, "Yeah, okay, you can promote that music in my bar and club." And they're like, "Okay." And then it became widespread over there. If we do the same for rock and roll, everybody's skeptic and cynic about like a rock and roll party, and like that's not going to get customers. That's only going to get older generation people. That's only going to get, and that's not an undesired customer for the party that I want to start. So it's not going to be a hot party. But if there were people like Cal Calco in every American city that says, "I'm going to invite the ones who dress up cool, the ones who look sexy, the ones who can make a party hot. I'm going to build that crowd into my party, in my house, and then when I have a big enough draw, I'm going to invade the clubs and bars and conquer it," then it's going to be a powerful presence. And you're going to get reviews from Time Out and all those magazines, and then you're going to be the hottest promoter in town. If you can stick it to these bars and clubs and proves that you can get a crowd. And the house movement, how they started, I think that's more punk rock than anything we ever did. And like, since we can't penetrate the Clear Channel and Infinity and CBS radio owned monopoly of radio, we can't penetrate that. We can't penetrate Coachella. We can't penetrate Pitchfork and all those other websites. I guess this is the only avenue where we can get people exposed to the music. These bands don't placate their sound to radio. They don't placate their sounds to what the labels want. They don't placate their sounds to certain festivals or magazines. And the fact that they're still doing and creating the music that they want to do, despite the fact that there's no influential platform that's helping get their music anywhere, is worthy of respect.
What hope does Soul Parade, where would it like to be in 10 years' time? What would it like to have established within 10 years?
Soul Parade aims to develop all the bands who are attempting to all the bands who are attempting to sustain the greatness of rock and roll, to develop them and help them achieve that.
And in 10 years, we'll hopefully dominate the charts.
In 10 years, we'll hopefully have our trump cards. Just like Maiden and Scorpions and Van Halen paved the way for smaller bands like Rat and all those other ones. Just like, Soundgarden and Nirvana and Pearl Jam paved the way for Dinosaur Jr. Hopefully we're going to find these trump cards, these saviors, these bands that everybody can be finally. We can have something we can claim for ourselves. We can have something that our generation can be proud of. Bands that said that I was a part of that movement. I was a part of that scene. And I'm proud of that. And I'm glad that happened in my time. Right now all the bands are in this weird troubleshooting phase. They're lost in their own experimentation to try to figure out a sound, statement, style, and attitude that will achieve that level of greatness that would make them eclipse the legends before them. Or not eclipse, or maybe just match up to the level of greatness of the heroes before and of the legends before them. And the fact that they're the only ones who are doing that, they're the only ones who are taking that risk, makes them heroic. It deserves my support. And if you're a fan of the genre, I think it deserves at least your interest and your support too. There is a movement going on, there is a backlash going on, and it feels like one of those early chapters of a rock star autobiography. It feels like that. It feels that romantic. And it's up to you whether or not you want to be a part of that.
I do.
I do.